In this video, we're going to take a look at an SQL injection challenge on Portswigger's Web Security Academy. The lab is called SQL Injection with Filter Bypass via XML Encoding, and there's only a little bit of information here, so let me just read through this before we jump into the lab. It tells us that so far we've been using query strings to inject a malicious SQL payload. However, it's important to note that you can perform SQL injection attacks using any controllable input that is processed as an SQL query by the application. For example, some websites take input in JSON or XML format and use this to query the database. These different formats may even provide alternative ways for you to obfuscate attacks that are otherwise blocked due to web application firewalls and other defense mechanisms. Weak implementations often just look for common SQL injection keywords within the request, so you may be able to bypass these filters by simply encoding or escaping characters in the prohibited keywords. For example, the following XML-based SQL injection uses XML escape sequence to encode the S character in select. So you can see here we've got some XML, we've got a product ID, a store ID. The store ID is supposed to be 999, but this SQL query has been appended to it. Notice that we don't have any quotes here. Quite often, whenever we inject a SQL statement, we'll need to use a single or a double quote. That hasn't actually happened here, so it's just a standard select all from information underscore schema tables. The only difference is that S has been replaced with this XML escape sequence to bypass the firewall. So this will be decoded by the server side before being passed to the SQL interpreter. And that's it. That's the only information we have. Let's open up the lab and go and see what information we have here. So our description tells us that we have an SQL injection vulnerability in the stock check feature. The results from the query are returned to the application's response, so you can use a union tag to retrieve data from other tables. The database contains a users table, which contains the usernames and passwords of registered users. To solve the lab, perform an SQL injection attack to retrieve the admin's user credentials and then log into their account. And we've got a hint here, we can check if we get stuck. We've also got an official solution below it. That's fine. I'm going to click Access the Lab. I actually used Control and click to open in a new tab, but it's kind of annoying because you get this loading screen whenever you're using the Web Security Academy. Anyway, this loads up and we have access to the shop. So let's just go and have a look at the basic features. We've got Home, we've got My Account. We can go into My Account and ask us to log in. So this is where we want to find these credentials. We want the administrator and we want to be able to log in with their password to solve the challenge. So close that down. What else have we got? We've got a lot of products here. We can view the details. Presumably they'll all have similar information. We've got a description and then we have this location. We can change the location and then we can click check stock. And then we can return. So that seems to be all the functionality. Let's take a look in Burp Suite and see what's actually happening whenever we make this request. So you can see we've got this post request to product stock. And down here, we have this XML data with our product ID and store ID. So there's a few ways we could deal with this. What I like to do is just right click this request and send it to the repeater. You can do Control and R as well. And that means we can just go and have a play around with this. The first thing that I tried to do was just insert a quote just to see what happens. And whenever we do that, we get this response, attack detected. Okay, so that's fine. Let's try again. Let's do select, all in capitals, and we get attack detected again. Let's try without the S. And this time we get 0 units. So it's actually it's looking for the keyword, i.e. select. And by the looks of it, it's also looking for some specific characters. We could try some other characters as well. It's not got any problems with that. We could try a semicolon. It's not got any problems with that either. So that's fine. Let's go back to this encoded version that we have. We'll take a copy of that and go back to Burp. We'll paste this in and we get 0 units. So by using this entity, we have bypassed the checks. So some kind of filter in place, some kind of web application firewall, which is checking for those dangerous characters and dangerous keywords. And we were able to bypass it, but we've not actually retrieved any useful information. So we need to try and come up with a proper payload. And again, there's a few ways we could do this. You can just search for HTML entity converter. I use CyberChef, so you can go in here and just search HTML, and we've got this to_HTML entity, and we can put in here select. It doesn't do anything because it's only dealing with special characters at the moment. So I'm going to change that to convert all characters, which isn't needed. We only actually need to change one of the characters, but There's also no harm in changing them all. So what payload will we put here? We don't want this to just be a select statement because we were actually told we want to conduct a union attack. So essentially we want to grab data we want to grab a column from one table, i.e. the users table, and merge that with the data that we're already grabbing from, I guess, the stock or the product table. So we can do that. We can say union select, and then let's say we want to select the username from the table users. Take a copy of that and let's paste that in here. Hit send, and again we get 0 units. So you might think here maybe we've done something wrong, maybe we've got our statement incorrect, or maybe the way we're encoding some of these characters isn't working. But actually, whenever you see this happen, the best thing to do is just go and make sure that the field is being reflected. So for example, let's go down to the store ID. We'll hit send, and this time we have Carlos. We have our 264 units, which is what was being grabbed from the store or the product table. And then we have administrator and Wiener. So we've got our administrator user. That's great. All we need to do now is grab the password, and we can just simply change this to select password. We can copy this over, paste that in, and now we've got the passwords. This is fine. We know it's I think the second user it was in the list, but it's probably a good idea to be more specific. Let's just say we've got thousands of users here and we want to get the administrator. So we can go back here and let's say where username is equal to administrator. So we want to union select, we want to select the password from the users table where the username is equal to administrator, and we want that to be a union operation so that it comes back with the data that we're already grabbing from the product table or whatever. So paste that in, and we have an XML parsing error. Let me go back. Oh, so we can convert this to some different types. I have this set to named entities at the moment, but actually what we wanted was hex entities. And we could verify that by, let me change that back to select. Change that back to select, and if we go back to our main page, we'll see this was hex. So you can see x53, and this is beginning with x53. If we have that as named, that's in decimal, so 83. So let's go back to hex entities. Let me copy this one, paste this in here, and now we've got back this password, which should be for our administrator because we've specified that. So let's go back to my account. We'll go here and enter in administrator, try to log in, and we've logged in. Congratulations, you solved the lab. So that's how we can perform SQL injection with a filter bypass via XML encoding. I also tried to complete this with SQLMap, and I didn't actually get it working, but during the troubleshooting process, I think I came across some cool Tamper scripts and stuff and some cool configuration options, which you might not have seen. So if you want a bit of bonus content, stick around, and I'm going to take a look at SQLMap and how we can try to deal with more complex cases where we need to bypass web application firewalls, and also how we can try to troubleshoot when things aren't going as expected. So that's done. Let's try and log out and go back to the description. Access lab again. It still says you've solved it. Hopefully this is going to work for us. Let me go into check stock. The last time I tried this, it wasn't working because the instance closed down after the lab was solved, but maybe this will work okay. Alright, so the way I like to use SQLMap generally is to just copy the request and save it in a request file. So let me create a new.request. Oh, I didn't spell it right, but that's fine. And you can actually specify, if we know which parameter we want to test, we can actually specify that with an asterisk. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm just going to let it do its thing. By default, what I normally do is just run SQLMap. I can't type. New.request. And then you can use batch just to say that you just want to say yes to any question it asks. And if we run through this, you'll see that it shouldn't find anything. And obviously the reason being, we know we have some web application firewall in place. So with SQLMap, you can do -h to bring up the help option, and we've got quite a lot in here, but we also have HH, which brings up a detailed help option. And there's a lot of really powerful options in here. I'm trying to find the Tamper scripts. You see I'm struggling because there is so much in here. Oh, actually, no, what we need to do, let me do grep-i tamper, and here we go. So we can specify a tamper with --tamper. We can also do --list tampers to get all of the tamper scripts that are available. So let me do that. And here we go. I'll zoom out just so they're all on one line. And you can see we've got a lot of different options here. So essentially I tried to have a look here for the entities related ones. So we have one for hex entities. We have HTML encode. And you can see what this is going to do. So basically you want to try and look for the syntax that we're looking for, which, let me go back, it was, so each character becomes an AND symbol, a hash, and then the hex, and then a semicolon. And if you go back here, this is exactly what we have, AND, hash, and then a hex value and a semicolon. So this is the most likely one, hex entities. But some of the others might be worth trying as well. The HTML encode looks quite similar. And I saw another one in here, I think it was the decimal, yes. That's what we were initially trying, if you remember. That's why we got the XML parsing error whenever I tried to get the admin's password. So there's a few kind of similar options there, but in our case, we want to use this hex entities. So let's do this again. Let's go back and run the same script, but we're going to say --tamper equals, and then we give it the hex entities option. We can run through this and see whether it comes up with anything that's saying does not seem to be injectable, which is never a good sign. So how do we debug this? Well, we could try some of the things we could do, like the level, we could do the risk, we could try some of those other Tamper scripts. What I typically do here is just add some verbosity, so you can say -v and then give a number to say how verbose you want it to be. I'm just using 6 here because that's what I used whenever I was playing through this. And essentially, as we're running through them, we can see every payload that gets sent through, and we can see the responses. Now, you might notice an issue here, but before we deal with that, or before we look into that, notice that the response here is this lab is not accessible over HTTP. And we can scroll down to the next one, or the one above, and you'll see that this is this is a response for every request that we're sending. So let's close that down, and let's do SQLMap -h, or I'll do -hh again, and then I'm going to grep case insensitive, and let's say HTTPS. And you can see here then we've got this option force SSL, which will do as it says. So let's try that again. Let's leave the verbosity so that we can just make sure that the response is looking okay. And you'll see it comes back with 0 units. So that's looking as we would expect. It doesn't have the error message about HTTPS, so that's great. Unfortunately, if we run through that all, we're still going to have problems. And the reason being, you might have noticed here, the payload that's being sent, what we should have is an AND symbol followed by the hex value and a semicolon. But instead, the AND symbol has been replaced by AND, and then AMP, and then the semicolon. And this is not what we want, unfortunately. So essentially, I tried here to look for encode and see is there anything we can do here. We've got the skip URL encode option. So let's try that again. We run through that. Again, it's not looking any better. We've still got this AND AMP. I also tried, there is a no escape option, so tried that as well. You can do -- no escape. Again, same thing. And you might not like to debug this in the terminal through SQLMap. So another thing that I often like to do is set a proxy. So again, I always just like to grep out the options rather than searching through or trying to memorize them or looking up cheat sheets. So we do this again. Let's do --proxy is equal to, and I'm going to do HTTP our localhost, so 127.0.0.1, and then whatever port you have burp running on. And actually, let me just clear out the burp history as well before we do this. So we let that run, and this means that we can just see this all in burp. So if you'd rather check the requests here and make sure that it's looking the same as it is in SQLMap, then that's perfectly fine. But as you can see, it's not looking good for us. What I find interesting here is that you can actually see each time the payload looks okay. So you can see here and hash x31, and that's the payload that should be sent. But whenever we look at the actual request, the and has been replaced with this and amp semicolon. And I couldn't find a way around this. Let me show again something else that I tried to do. It's just good practice to see what these kind of debugging processes are. So the next thing I tried to do was see if we could locate the entities. See SQLMap. Was it called HTML? It was called hex entities. Okay, locate hex entities. There we go. There's our SQLMap Tamper. Can open that up with Codium and see what's actually happening. And essentially, it just goes through the payload. So it takes our payload, it's going to run through the payload, and for each character, it's going to add this. It's going to convert it to decimal, and it's going to add the and hash x and then a semicolon at the end. I actually thought that the and symbol was being encoded here, so I just added something to basically say if the payload I equal to and then basically say don't encode it. But it didn't work, and as you notice there is no issues with this tamper, because whenever we looked at the payload, it was actually looking fine. It was only in the actual post response that it wasn't. And we can verify that. Let's take out a load of this stuff. Let's get rid of everything, including this hex entities. We run through that, and okay, no, actually, sorry, we want to keep the hex entities. -- tamper equals hex entities. So yeah, we run through that, and you can see it has this and amp each time. There's nothing that I could find that we could actually change. I also had a look for, let me do locate convert.py. I saw this, I had a look at the source code for SQLMap on the GitHub, and I noticed that this convert.py is where that conversion actually happens. So you can see here, it will convert any ands to and amp. But I tried to actually remove this and save the code, and it didn't help either. That's the only time it's mentioned in here. So I'm not too sure what this was about. I thought I would just run through the steps that I took in trying to debug this. You can write your own Tamper scripts and stuff anyway. You can modify Tamper scripts, so hopefully this is a useful learning exercise. But as for the actual issue, I'm not sure how we can get around that. I think I might raise a GitHub issue. It's probably, normally when I raise GitHub issues, the developers are just like, either, I missed something, or they're just like, oh, that's intended, or there's something that I'm not aware of, and it just normally gets closed without being fixed. But I think I'll raise this because I think this is interesting. The payload here looks okay, and then whenever we've got it in the post data, it's not okay. And I think that some of those options that we have, like the skip URL encode and the no escape, maybe things like that should help. Otherwise, maybe there's some other option that I'm missing. If anybody knows, please do leave a comment on YouTube and let us know how you got around this. Is there some kind of custom solution, or am I missing some option somewhere? And I'll be interested to hear that. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and this challenge. I'm going to just open up a Twitter thread that Intigriti posted yesterday. This is a SQL thread which basically went through some key resources. So you can see the Web Security Academy is here first, and we've got some cheat sheets, some cool videos, some burp extensions. So you can see here there's a burp extension to use SQLMap within burp. If you don't want to just use that proxy option, I'm sure there's some additional features to that as well. Some interesting write-ups, and then we've got some cool bug bounty reports as well here. Or not here, they're in here somewhere. But yeah, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Thanks.